quiz. How do you say the names of these popular states? Is it California or California? Do you say Florida or Florida? Should you pronounce it New York or New York? If you're not 100% sure how to say these states, don't worry, you're not alone. Many of the non-native speakers I work with have trouble identifying which syllable to stress or emphasize when they're saying the 50 United States. Remember, these are people who live here in the United States, so they definitely want to get it right. In American English, one syllable of every word will be stressed or emphasized more than the others. When a syllable is stressed, the vowel sound will be longer, louder, and higher in pitch. The vowel sound will be extra clear with your mouth really exaggerating the sound and the shape. The rest of the syllables in the word are unstressed, de-emphasized, or even reduced. They're less obvious. They're shorter, quieter, and lower in pitch. When a syllable is reduced, the vowel sound will even change. It'll turn into the schwa sound, which is the sound, or into the I sound. Word stress is absolutely essential for clear pronunciation in American English. If you've ever said the name of a state and someone didn't understand you, chances are you emphasized the wrong syllable or none at all. That's why we're going to practice word stress with all 50 states in this video. Let's get started. To get the most out of this word stress practice, be sure to grab a rubber band. If you can't find a rubber band, you can use your hands. You can mimic the shape of a rubber band, conduct like a musician, or even clap. The reason we use the rubber band when practicing stress is that we want to emphasize the contrast between stressed and unstressed syllables. When we stress a syllable, we rise to that higher pitch and hold that syllable a little longer than usual. Then we close back down afterwards. The rubber band reminds you of the contrast and helps you remember both visually and physically. Another thing I want to mention is that I'm from the New England area and you may hear some regional influences on the way I say these words. However, I'm going to do my best to pronounce the 50 states the way the locals do. That said, people with other regional accents, including locals, may say them slightly differently than the way I would. Here we go. Let's start in alphabetical order. The first state is Alabama. Alabama. The stress is on the third syllable. Alabama. Alabama. Be sure to hold that stress syllable as you rise to your highest pitch. Alabama. Alabama. Next, Alaska. Alaska. This state is stressed on the second syllable. Alaska. 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 Next up, we have Arizona. Arizona. The stress is on the third syllable. Arizona. 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 Let's move on to Arkansas. Arkansas. For this state, we stress the first syllable. Arkansas. Arkansas. It can be challenging to stress the first syllable if you want to rush through the word. Be sure to hold that first syllable and make it longer, louder, and higher in pitch. Arkansas. Arkansas. Next, California. California. As you can hear, we're stressing the third syllable. California. California. Be sure not to add an extra syllable to the end of California. 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 Moving on, Colorado. Colorado. Once again, the stress is on the third syllable. Colorado. 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 Here's a state that a lot of people find tricky. Connecticut. Connecticut. As you can hear, Connecticut is stressed on the second syllable. Connecticut. 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 You can also hear the reductions in this word. Next up, Delaware. Delaware. This state is stressed on the first syllable. Delaware. 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 Remember, you need to hold that stress syllable and then close back down afterwards. Delaware. Delaware. Let's move on to Florida. Florida. As you can hear, Florida is also stressed on the first syllable. Florida. 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 Now we have Georgia. 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 As you can hear, this is just 2 syllables, and it's stressed on the first syllable. Georgia, Georgia, Georgia. Let's move on to Hawaii. Hawaii. You may hear people say Hawaii, and you may also hear native Hawaiians say Hawaii. You'll hear a glottal stop before the last syllable of this word, but it is stressed on the second syllable. Hawaii, Hawaii, Hawaii. As I mentioned, you'll hear mainland Americans say Hawaii, and the stress will still be on the second syllable. Hawaii, Hawaii. Next up, Idaho. Idaho. This state is stressed on the first syllable. Idaho, Idaho, Idaho. Let's move on to Illinois. Illinois. This state is stressed on the last syllable, and it's pronounced a little different than it looks. Illinois, Illinois, Illinois. Moving on, Indiana. Indiana. As you can hear, this is stressed on the third syllable. Indiana, Indiana, Indiana. Let's keep going. Iowa, Iowa. We stress Iowa on the first syllable. Iowa, Iowa, Iowa. Moving on, Kansas, Kansas. As you can hear, this is stressed on the first syllable. Kansas, Kansas, Kansas. The next state is Kentucky. Kentucky. This state is stressed on the second syllable. Kentucky, Kentucky, Kentucky. Now we have Louisiana. Louisiana. Like Indiana, it's stressed on the second to last syllable. Louisiana, Louisiana, Louisiana. Let's move on to Maine. Maine. As you can hear, Maine is 1 syllable. However, remember that 1-syllable content words are still stressed. You need to make the vowel sound in Maine longer, louder, and higher in pitch. Maine, Maine, Maine. Next up, Maryland. Maryland. As you can hear, the first syllable is stressed. Maryland, Maryland, Maryland. Now let's talk about Massachusetts. Massachusetts. Massachusetts is home to Boston, one of my favorite cities. We're going to stress the third syllable. Massachusetts. 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 Moving on, Michigan. Michigan. As you can hear, we're stressing the first syllable. Michigan. 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 Next up, Minnesota. Minnesota. This state is stressed on the third syllable. Minnesota. 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 Now let's talk about Mississippi. Mississippi. This is also stressed on the third syllable. Mississippi. 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 Next, let's look at Missouri. Missouri. Missouri is stressed on the second syllable. Missouri. 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 We're halfway through the 50 states. How are you feeling about the stress? Are you remembering to make the stress syllable longer, louder, and higher in pitch? You're probably noticing the reduced syllables as well. Listen for the ones that don't sound the way you expect. They're reduced to the schwa sound or the I sound. Remember, it's this contrast between stressed and unstressed syllables that gives English its natural rhythm and melody. Let's keep going. Let's go on to Montana. Montana. Montana is stressed on the second syllable. Montana. 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 Moving on, Nebraska. Nebraska. Nebraska is stressed on the second syllable. Nebraska. 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 Now we have a state that you may hear people pronounce incorrectly. Nevada. Nevada. You may hear Americans from other parts of the country say Nevada. Nevada. But locals pronounce it Nevada. Nevada with stress on the second syllable. Nevada, Nevada, Nevada. Now let's move on to the state where I was born, New Hampshire. New Hampshire. This is the first two-word state. When states have two words, the stress will be on the stressed syllable of the second word. The first word will be unstressed. It will still be easy to understand, but it won't be emphasized. Let's say that again. New Hampshire. The stress is on the first syllable of the second word. New Hampshire. New Hampshire. New Hampshire. Here's another state that begins with new. New Jersey. New Jersey. Once again, the stress will be on the second word. It's on the first syllable of the second word. New Jersey. New Jersey. New Jersey. Moving on, New Mexico. New Mexico. Once again, we're stressing the first syllable of the second word. New Mexico. New Mexico. New Mexico. Here's another one of my favorite states, New York. New York. As you can hear, we're stressing the second word, York. New York. New York. New York. Here are a few more two-word states. Next up, we have North Carolina. North Carolina. This state is stressed on the third syllable of the second word. North Carolina. North Carolina. North Carolina. Here's another North state. North Dakota. North Dakota. Once again, we're stressing the second word, and in this case, it's on the second syllable. North Dakota. North Dakota. North Dakota. Let's talk about Ohio. Ohio. Ohio is stressed on the second syllable. Ohio. 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 Next, Oklahoma. Oklahoma. This state is stressed on the third syllable. Oklahoma. 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 Moving on, Oregon. Oregon. Oregon is stressed on the first syllable. Oregon. 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 I just wanted to mention that you may hear Americans who are not from the West Coast mispronounce this state as Oregon. That's how I pronounced the word until somebody finally corrected me when I was in college. Moving on, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. The stress will be on the third syllable. Pennsylvania. 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 If you ever feel a little stressed when you see a long word like Pennsylvania, try to identify the stressed syllable. That will help you be able to understand how to construct the rest of the word. When you break a word into syllables, it's easier to pronounce. Moving on, Rhode Island. Rhode Island. Once again, the stress will be in the second word. In this case, it's on the first syllable. Rhode Island. Rhode Island. Rhode Island. Next up, South Carolina. South Carolina. As you can hear, we're stressing the third syllable of the second word. South Carolina. South Carolina. South Carolina. The only time you'll stress north or south is when you need to clarify because someone didn't understand you. Did you say South Carolina? No, North Carolina. Otherwise, the stress will be on the second word. Now let's talk about South Dakota. South Dakota. Once again, we're going to stress the second syllable of the second word. South Dakota. South Dakota. South Dakota. Let's move on to Tennessee. Tennessee. As you can hear, the stress is on the final syllable of this word. Tennessee. 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 Now let's talk about Texas. Texas. This state is stressed on the first syllable. Texas. 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 Here's another state. Utah. Utah. Once again, this state is stressed on the first syllable. Utah. 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 Now we have Vermont. Vermont. Vermont is stressed on the second syllable. Vermont. 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 Moving on, let's talk about Virginia. Virginia. Virginia is stressed on the second syllable. Virginia. 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 Now we have the state of Washington. Washington. Washington is stressed on the first syllable. Washington. 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 You can really hear the reduced syllable at the end of the word. Washington. Just a few more. West Virginia. West Virginia. Remember, we're going to stress the second word, and in this case, it's the second syllable of this word. West Virginia. West Virginia. West Virginia. Moving on, Wisconsin. Wisconsin. We're going to stress the second syllable. Wisconsin. 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 Last but not least, Wyoming. Wyoming. Wyoming is stressed on the second syllable. Wyoming. 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 As you can hear, getting the stress right makes a big difference in how clearly you pronounce these states. Just like we did with all of the 50 states, it can be helpful to practice stress by category. While there are definitely stress patterns that you can practice and learn, sometimes the stress seems a little random. In this case, it's helpful to make a list of words you use all the time, such as states, cities, or countries, and practice the stress for all of them. That way you'll get more comfortable identifying and saying the stress syllable. As a little bonus, let's talk about the territories of the United States as well as the District of Columbia. As you probably know, Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States. However, it is not a state itself. When we talk about our nation's capital, we say Washington, D.C., with stress on the C at the end of that word. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. Locals are much more likely to refer to the nation's capital as DC, DC, with stress on the letter C. DC, DC, DC. Similarly, when we talk about the US, we stress the letter S. US, US, US. Another territory of the United States is Puerto Rico. As you probably know, people in Puerto Rico speak Spanish, so they will pronounce their territory differently than the average American. However, because we're talking about the pronunciation in English, I'm going to pronounce it as it is in English. Puerto Rico. As you can hear, the stress is still on the second word. It's on the first syllable of the second word. Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. Now let's talk about Guam. Guam. Guam is one syllable, but it will still be stressed. You need to make the vowel sound longer, louder, and higher in pitch. Guam. 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 Next, let's talk about American Samoa. As we've practiced with the states and other territories, the second word will be stressed. In this case, it will be the second syllable. American Samoa. American Samoa. American Samoa. Now let's talk about the U.S. Virgin Islands. As you can hear, we're going to stress the S in U.S. as well as the first syllable of the last word, islands. U.S. Virgin Islands. U.S. Virgin Islands. U.S. Virgin Islands. Last, we have the Northern Mariana Islands. Northern Mariana Islands. Once again, we're going to stress that last word. We're going to stress the first syllable of islands. Northern Mariana Islands. Northern Mariana Islands. Northern Mariana Islands. Now that you've learned how to stress all of the 50 states as well as the U.S. territories, be sure to practice. If you're not used to emphasizing the stressed syllables of words or word pairs, it can take some time. Remember to make the stressed syllable longer, louder, and higher in pitch with an extra clear vowel sound. Be sure to watch this video on contrast if you need more practice distinguishing between stressed and unstressed syllables. Leave a comment letting me know which states you visited or which states you'd like to visit. Remember to stress them correctly. Once again, I'm Kim from EnglishWithKim.com. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Be sure to hit subscribe and click that bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. Have a good one. Goodbye.